She gave her house keys to a homeless stranger. 6 months later, she came back and couldn't believe what she found. Opening hook. Imagine this. You're rushing to the airport. You're a businesswoman, sharp, focused, no time to waste. You've got a flight to catch, a contract worth millions on the line, and your phone hasn't stopped buzzing since 6 this morning. And then, right outside the subway station, you nearly trip over something. Not something, someone. A young girl, barely 20 years old, sitting on the cold concrete pavement. She's holding a tiny baby wrapped in a gray blanket. Next to her, a worn-out bag with a broken strap and a plastic grocery bag. That's all she has. She's not crying. She's not begging. She's not even looking at the not begging. She's not even looking at the people walking past. She's just staring at nothing, with the eyes of someone who stopped expecting help a long time ago. What would you do? Diana did something that most people would never even consider. She reached into her pocket and handed the stranger the keys to her house, and that single decision changed everything. Chapter 1. Who is Diana? Diana was 45 years old. She was not the kind of woman who let emotions run her life. She was practical, methodical, the kind of person who color codes her calendar and has a backup plan for her backup plan. She had built her business from the ground up. No inheritance, no lucky connections, no shortcuts. Just years of hard work, tough negotiations, and contracts she read 3 times before signing. Her company handled international supply chains, goods, logistics, partners across 4 different countries. By the time she was 45, she had everything she had worked for: a successful business, an apartment in the city, and a quiet little country house about 20 miles outside town. Everything in Diana's life had its place. Documents in a fireproof cabinet, keys always on the same hook by the door, plans written in a leather notebook she never left home without. Even her emotions seemed organized. There was a time for feelings, and that time was not right now, not when there was work to be done. But on that cold October morning, something shifted, something she hadn't planned for. Chapter 2. The Meeting. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary gray October Tuesday. Diana was dragging her suitcase down the sidewalk, phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder, reading a last-minute email from a business partner. Flight in 2 hours, taxi already waiting. She didn't have time to slow down, and then she almost walked right into her. The girl was sitting just outside the subway station entrance, on a folded jacket laid down on the pavement. She looked young, 20, maybe 21 at most. She was holding a baby bundled in a gray blanket, so small that Diana couldn't see its face. Beside her sat a beaten-up bag with a snapped strap, and a crumpled plastic bag with what looked like a few cans of food inside. That was everything. The girl wasn't holding up a sign. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't doing anything at all, just sitting there with empty, exhausted gray eyes fixed on some distant point that no one else could see. Diana walked past. 3 steps, 4, 5. Then she stopped. She couldn't explain it. Not then, not later. Maybe it was the cold, the kind of raw October wind that cuts right through you, and she found herself wondering what it felt like when you couldn't go inside. Maybe it was the baby, that tiny, oblivious little life, wrapped in a thin blanket, not yet old enough to understand how fragile its world was. Or maybe it was simply something human, something that no amount of organization or practicality could fully suppress, that made her turn around. She walked back. "How long have you been sitting here?" Diana asked. The girl looked up slowly. Careful eyes, not frightened, not hopeful, just tired. "Since last night," she said quietly. Her name was Lisa. She was 21 years old. She had come to the city 3 months ago with a boyfriend who had promised her an apartment and a job. Neither materialized. He disappeared before the baby was born. She couldn't afford to rent a room. The shelters were full, wait lists everywhere. Her family was far away and couldn't help. The baby, a boy named Max, was 2.5 months old. Diana stood there and listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer empty sympathy. She just listened. Then she looked at her watch. then at Lisa, then at the baby. And she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "I have a country house," she said. "It's been empty for months. I'm leaving for a business trip. 2, maybe 3 months. There's everything you need. A bed, a kitchen, hot water, a fireplace with wood already stacked. Take the keys. Stay there." Lisa stared at her as if she'd misheard. "You're serious?" "I don't make jokes when I'm late for a flight," Diana said flatly. She pulled a notepad from her bag, wrote down the address, and pressed the paper and the keys into Lisa's hand. "If anything breaks, don't touch it. Just leave it. And please don't smoke inside." She turned and walked to her waiting taxi. On the plane, Diana thought about the contract, about the negotiations, about her schedule for the week ahead. She thought about Lisa only once, just before she fell asleep, somewhere over the Atlantic. A small, quiet thought. "I hope she makes it there okay." Then she closed her eyes. 6 months of silence. The trip that was supposed to last 3 months stretched into 6. First, the negotiations stalled. Then one of her partners filed a dispute, a legal battle that dragged on for over 3 months. Then Diana herself got sick. Pneumonia, 2 weeks in a foreign hospital, another week recovering in her hotel room. She worked from her bed. She answered emails in between coughing fits. She pushed through, because that's what Diana did. Through all of it, the country house barely crossed her mind. Once or twice she thought about calling to check in, but she didn't have Lisa's number. Once or twice she thought about asking a neighbor to look in, but it felt unnecessary. The girl had probably moved on months ago, found a shelter, a room, something. 3 months had passed, then 4, then 6. Surely she's long gone, Diana thought. When her plane finally touched down, Diana went straight to her city apartment. She slept for 12 hours. The next morning, she decided to drive out to the country house, just to check on things, make sure everything was in order before winter really set in. She wasn't worried. She had no reason to be. She came back and froze. Diana turned onto the familiar lane and slowed the car. Something was wrong. She pulled up to the gate and stepped out. The house was still there. The trees were still there. The old fence posts were still there. But everything else was different. On the garden gate hung a new wooden sign, freshly painted, with neat letters carved into it. The Watson family. Diana didn't know anyone named Watson. The front yard had been completely transformed. Raised garden beds, neatly prepared for winter. A small plastic greenhouse tucked along the side wall. A new welcome mat at the front door. A children's rocking chair on the porch. White, with little yellow ducks painted on it. Diana took out her key and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Slower this time, making sure it was in properly. Nothing. The key didn't fit, because the lock had been changed. Someone had replaced the lock on her house. From the neighboring garden, an older woman in a floral headscarf leaned over the fence. "Oh, hello, dear. Are you here to see Lisa? She's home. I just saw her putting the little one down for a nap." Diana turned to look at her. "To see Lisa?" she repeated quietly. "This is my house." The woman blinked. "Your house? But Lisa's been living here for 6 months. Such a sweet girl, always says hello. We all assumed it was her place." Diana turned back to the door and pressed the bell. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow ones. A shadow moved behind the curtain. A long pause. Too long for someone who was simply walking to the door. The lock clicked. Lisa stood in the doorway. She had changed. The pale, hollow-eyed girl from the sidewalk was gone. Her cheeks were flushed with color. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She wore a warm knitted sweater. Behind her, on the living room rug, little Max sat propped against a cushion, looking at the world with wide, curious eyes. They stared at each other. Several seconds passed without a word. "You didn't let me know you were coming," Lisa said at last. Her voice was steady, almost calm. Something went cold inside Diana's chest. "Lisa," she said slowly, "this is my house. I don't need to let anyone know before coming to my own house. I understand, Lisa replied, but I have nowhere to go. 5 words, not a plea, not a question, a statement. The full picture. Diana didn't raise her voice. She got back in her car, drove to the end of the lane, and called her lawyer. What she learned over the next 24 hours left her breathless. In 6 months, Lisa had replaced all the locks on the doors and the garden gate, registered her address with the local social services office as her official place of residence, listing herself as a single mother without housing. Used that address to access benefits and support programs. Been advised by a local family support center that they won't dare evict you with a baby. Hold on to that roof. Used Diana's dishes, linens, and garden tools. Repainted the kitchen ceiling and the garden fence. Built raised beds in the garden. Hung a family nameplate on the gate. Diana's lawyer was direct. You can't remove her overnight, not with a child involved. If you approach this aggressively, social services could get involved, and then you're looking at months of legal proceedings. We need to handle this carefully and by the book. How long? Diana asked. If she agrees to leave voluntarily, 1 to 2 weeks. If she fights it, could be months. Diana sat with that information for a long moment. Then she said, set up a meeting, her, me, you, and the local housing officer, tomorrow. The conversation that changed everything. They arrived the next morning. Diana, her lawyer, and a housing authority officer. Lisa opened the door and saw the 3 of them standing there. Something shifted in her face. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Diana's lawyer laid out the facts quietly and precisely. The house belonged to Diana. There was no lease, no rental agreement, no legal claim to residence. A temporary address registration did not constitute ownership or tenancy rights. Changing the locks on someone else's property without permission was a criminal offense. Lisa sat and listened. She didn't argue, she didn't make excuses. And then, quietly, not dramatically, not for effect, she started to cry. Not the loud, gasping kind, the silent kind. The kind that happens when a person has been holding it together for so long that they simply can't anymore. They told me at the family center that no one would remove me with a baby, she whispered, that I was safe here. I wasn't trying to steal from you. I was so afraid of going back to the street. You have no idea what it felt like, that night outside the subway, with Max in my arms, in the cold. I would have done anything not to go back there. The room was quiet. Diana looked at her, at the baby on her lap, at his round, uncomprehending eyes. When Diana finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but firm. I understand fear, she said. I do, but what you did was wrong. You used someone's kindness against them. You changed the locks on my house. You registered my address as yours without my knowledge or permission. That is not okay, no matter how frightened you were. Lisa looked down. I know, she said softly. I know. A long pause. I'll give you 2 weeks, Diana said. I've already spoken to a crisis center for mothers. They have a room available, real support, help with documents, baby supplies, a roof over your head while you get back on your feet. It's not the street, but you are leaving this house. Lisa nodded. She didn't look up. 2 weeks passed. Diana drove to the house alone that morning. No lawyer, no officer, just her. Lisa was standing on the porch when Diana pulled up. Beside her sat that same worn-out bag with the broken strap. The very same one Diana had seen on the pavement outside the subway station 6 months ago. Max was in her arms, bigger now, bright-eyed, looking around at the autumn trees with quiet fascination. They stood facing each other in the morning light. Diana reached into her jacket and took out an envelope. There's money inside, she said. Enough for a few weeks of food and medicine for Max, and the address of the center is written on the front. They know you're coming. Lisa took the envelope. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Diana. Why are you still helping me? She asked. After everything. Diana was quiet for a second. Because anger is a poor compass, she said, and because Max didn't ask for any of this. Lisa nodded once. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't apologize. She simply picked up her bag, held her son a little closer, and walked down the path to the gate. She didn't look back. Diana watched her until she disappeared around the bend in the lane. Then she stepped inside the house, filled the kettle, and opened a window. The house smelled like someone else's life, faintly but unmistakably. But it was her house. That evening, she called a locksmith, had new locks fitted, had a security system installed, and for the first time in 6 months, she slept. Through the night, Diana never stopped helping people, but she changed the way she helped. From that day forward, only through organizations, only with paperwork, only with a clear understanding that generosity without structure is not kindness. It's chaos that ends up hurting everyone. She thought about Lisa often, not with bitterness. She thought about that girl on the pavement, pale, exhausted, empty, and how she had transformed into someone who changed locks on a stranger's door. Not out of cruelty, not out of greed, out of fear. And that, Diana realized, was the hardest part to sit with. Not the betrayal, not the anger, not the legal bill, the fear. Because fear, raw, desperate, backed into a corner fear, makes people do things they never thought themselves capable of. And maybe, just maybe, if the world offered better safety nets, Lisa would never have had to make that choice in the first place. So let me ask you something. If you had been in Diana's place that morning outside the subway, would you have stopped? Would you have handed over the keys? Or would the little voice in the back of your head have said, "Don't get involved, you don't know this person, it's not your problem"? And here's the harder question. If you had been in Lisa's shoes, cold, alone, a baby in your arms with nowhere to go, what would you have done to survive? There are no easy answers here. That's why this story stays with you. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story moved you, hit like. If someone in your life needs to hear it, share it with them. I'll see you in the next one.